We are dying faster by design. Whoa, Deja, why do you say that? Well, let me explain. The fatality rate in America is growing, and it may be on purpose because our culture has developed into an inhospitable death trap. Let's look at some numbers so that we can understand how many adults are actually becoming life-threateningly ill and what conditions are plaguing us the most. A recent study done by the CDC, or the Center for Disease Control, found that the leading causes of health-related deaths encompassing the US are heart disease as number one, with 680,981 cases documented as of 2023. Cancer at number two, with 613,352 cases, and cerebral vascular diseases such as strokes being number three, with 162,639 cases. But how did we get here? Well, that's an excellent question. We have evolution to blame. Now, that may sound like a blatantly flagrant statement to utter, but we need to take a look back at how our ancestors were able to survive and what was included within the cultural elements of humanity before the rise of scientific and technological advancement. So, how can we acquire a more hospitable culture contemporarily? Well, achieving a more hospitable culture first necessitates acknowledging certain aspects within our culture and confronting the flaws within it. One example of a harmful practice that is overlooked in American and English culture would be the favoring of activities centered around food and eating for entertainment or pleasure, along with the types of food we make available for consumption. Take mukbangs, for example, and their popularity. We are reminded by Daniele Lieberman in his 2013 book, The Story of the Human Body, that for our ancestors, eating served a purpose. His book poses the question, what are human bodies adapted for? And throughout this book, he references natural selection as he explains how our genus evolved from quadrupedal apes to bipedal humans. In describing the evolution of early hominins, who are basically just an early primate subspecies that modern humans have descended from, Lieberman elucidates how dietary choices made by the Toumaï and the Ardipithecus in comparison to earlier hominins had diverged from soft fruits to tougher, harder to chew plants, stating, "We can conjecture with some confidence that the first hominins probably gorged as much as they could on fruit, but natural selection favored those better able to resort to eating less desirable, tough, fibrous foods like woody stems of plants, which require lots of hard chewing to break down." This statement reprises the fact that eating was and still is a mechanism of survival. When he says that natural selection favored these individuals, he means that these individuals were able to adapt to the world changing around them by making compromises and sacrificing comfort and preferability to stay alive. Take the changing of seasons, for example. Despite our innate preference to dwell barebacked, likely a trait inherited from our earlier primate ancestors, those who are capable of covering or secluding themselves for the sake of preserving warmth are least likely to die of hypothermia. Now, going back to the topic of diet, if humans go long enough without food, our bodies will experience things like electrolyte imbalance leading to dehydration of the cells that form new tissue, metabolic acidosis, a condition that affects the pH levels of blood, heightening the acids to cell-damaging levels, and catabolism, a reaction that causes the body to consume muscle tissue, among much more, ultimately leading to death. Along with starvation, insufficient nutrient intake, or an overconsumption of one substance can also influence the like. Now, in making our culture more hospitable for the human body, we can start by shaping the way we see and think about food. When you look at food as an energy source and not as a reward, you begin to understand why variety is important. Many people shy away from foods like beets because they don't satisfy their taste buds, but they miss out on the salubrious benefits that beets offer. Hominins like the Toumaï or the Ardi did not consider choosing between foods that they enjoyed eating and foods that were healthy because the two factors weren't necessary options for survival. they didn't have to think about these things in the way that we do today. The foods that they naturally consumed were grown containing the optimal nutrients they needed for internal stability, known as homeostasis, because the foods were grown from the earth containing all, if not most, of the essential minerals and vitamins required for bodily function, and they weren't genetically engineered or manufactured for an orgasmic experience like the food we eat today. Since replacing or completely eliminating the reprehensible aspects of the food we consume, we simultaneously diminished the nutrients, thus causing us to rely on manufactured supplements and vitamins to replace what's been depleted from the food. The purpose of food is to build and fuel our bodies. Lieberman references the lifestyles of Australopiths, another late ancestor, stating that studies of Australopith teeth and ecological analysis of their habitats suggest that the Australopiths had diverse and complex diets that included not only fruits but also edible leaves, stems, and seeds. Now, I am not saying that we should be eating leaves, stems, and seeds. However, I am suggesting that, like the Australopiths, we should make careful consideration about what is truly edible and choose foods that are naturally derived. Edibility was the primary concern for these mammals because resources were scarce and energy was essential, whereas today, many foods that we consume are produced for convenience, satiability, and preservation. Modern-day diets include rice bagged in synthetically and chemically engineered plastic, poultry raised with growth hormones and antibiotics, breads with high sugar content, and fruits that, if eaten in influx over time, may result in the loss of a limb. Lieberman addresses the differences between the types of fruit that apes previously ate and still consume to the fruits that we have available for humans today. Imagine the various types of produce you find in your local grocery store. You'd likely find things like bananas, watermelon, and pineapples, to name a few, all of which are documented as being considered high glycemic fruits, meaning that these fruits raise the glucose within the blood, making consumers more susceptible to type 2 diabetes, which, if progressed far enough, can land you a spot within those 162,632 individuals mentioned earlier. Fruits have been crossbred for a more desirable taste and texture with little consideration to nutritional value. The fruit that we know of today is very different from the fruit that grows in the natural habitats of monkeys and apes. Lieberman also describes the facets of the fruits eaten by chimpanzees, denoting, every day, from dawn to dusk, a chimpanzee spends nearly half of its wakeful hours chewing like a raw foodist. Chimps typically eat forest fruits like wild figs, wild grapes, and palm fruits, none of which are as sweet and easy to chew as the domesticated bananas, apples, and oranges that you and I enjoy today. Instead, they are slightly bitter, less sweet than a carrot, extremely fibrous, and they have tough outer coverings. This statement suggests that the type of fruits eaten by apes were less calorific and could be eaten in larger quantities or at a higher frequency than the fruits that we have available today. 2020 data from the FDA supports that there is a vast amount of products passed off as safe for consumption in limited amounts in the United States. Despite trace amounts of harmful chemicals being present in one food product, when a combination of products containing the same harmful chemicals or differing yet still equally harmful chemicals are consumed together, our chances of developing various cancers and other health-related dilemmas becomes painstakingly higher. Statistics report that FDA regulations cover about 35,000 produce farms, 300,000 restaurant food establishments, and 10,500 vending machine operators. Despite their regulation of the products being manufactured as food items, the commodities that we devour are still found to contain harmful additives in a multitude of differing food products, advancing the development of health conditions and causing these conditions to approximate. Longitudinal experimental outcomes of the produce and ingredients within the food products we consume should be accounted for amongst more rigorous regulation of the products we consider food to see improvement in the nutritional quality of our food products. Data also suggests that about 57% of fresh fruit, 31% of vegetables, and 93% of seafood consumption by volume are imports, meaning that more than half of our produce sold in the United States is imported from other countries. This raises the question of, why do we see the same fruits and veggies in our grocery stores across the country when other countries have a wider variety? Take mulberries, for example. It's a fruit native to eastern and central China, and many have never even heard of it or seen it in the West. Despite it having a plethora of health benefits, including inflammation reduction due to its resveratrol content, and China is known as being, or should I say, previously known as being, a large trading partner of the United States, with about 18.22% of our food products coming from them. So why aren't we utilizing them for importation of healthier goods? Another growing concern within our culture is the normalization of prolonged sedentary activities and occupations. A 2022 report from the WHO, or the World Health Organization, mentions that 1/3 of adults worldwide do not meet the recommended amount of physical activity. That's 31%, or, to put it more into perspective, 1.8 billion out of the approximate 7 billion individuals on Earth. Now, these numbers will only continue to grow as we continue to rest our asses and watch each other shake our hips on TikTok instead of getting up and moving our own hips. Steering this discussion back to how evolution is to blame for this, we need to explore the timeline of our ancestors, the ancient Homo erectus, who changed the game in terms of physical agility by becoming the archaic example of bipedalism. Again, Lieberman addresses how primates evolved to run when hunting became necessary to capture game for food. This inevitable requirement came both at a cost whilst also having some gain. Primates who had the advantage of becoming bipedalists were now able to travel longer distances for persistence hunting. And as primates began to obtain anatomical autonomy, meaning that as we mated between species and practiced hunting and gathering, our joints and ligaments began to become more flexible. Now, some can argue that prolonged physical activity can't have physiological influence on our bodies, but I dare you to try yoga consistently for 3 months and tell me that you don't acquire improved flexibility and mobility. Or how about the discipline of parkour? If you watch someone in their journey from beginner to intermediate to professional, you'll see how efficiently they're able to transition into better runners, climbers, and jumpers, as well as having better balance than those of us who do not partake in parkour. Since the need for hunting is never more, thanks to agriculture and manufactured goods, we are no longer required to run and move as much as our ancestors did, thus giving us the option to remain inactive. As we remain stationary, we become comfortable sitting for long periods of time, and the thought of exercising feels exhausting to us. However, sitting for long periods of time can have a detrimental impact on our health. Exercise helps us to remain nimble by strengthening the muscles around our joints and by stimulating weight control. Don't believe me? Well, some excellent examples of what eating more and moving less can do to your body can be seen on TV. You know, the media we so love to consume. Take, for example, the docuseries My 600-Pound Life. Now, our early ancestors weren't indulging in media as a means of entertainment in the way that we do. Instead, they entertained one another in real time. Our need for social interaction has not diminished, although it has become apparent that we are not as inclined towards social adeptness as we once were. Our ancestors needed to locomote in groups for safety when hunting and gathering, which is what they spent most, if not all, of their time doing, as well as to support one another for higher success rates. As mentioned, once again by Lieberman, getting dinner, or for that matter, breakfast and lunch, probably does not dominate your list of daily concerns, yet most creatures are almost always hungry and preoccupied with the quest for calories and nutrients. To be sure, animals also need to find mates and avoid being eaten, but the struggle for existence is often a struggle for food, and until recently, the vast majority of humans were no exception to this rule. Consider also that acquiring food is even more taxing when your habitat alters dramatically, causing the food you normally eat to vanish or become less common. In other words, our ancestors were required to spend a lot more of their time looking for meals. Since the development of agriculture and industrialism, Instead of spending countless hours looking for and preparing what to eat, we have the luxury of spending likely no more than 15 minutes looking for and preparing food. That means that we have so much more time on our hands than our ancestors did, because all of their time was spent hunting and gathering. Despite the need for hunting and gathering becoming obsolete, our need for engaging with one another has remained. So please, the next time you decide to grab a bunch of friends and sit down for lunch at In-N-Out, instead think of ways you guys can bond with physical activity. Go for a run together. Play a game of tennis or basketball, hell. Even visit a trampoline park, but get active. And if you do choose to bond over food, try cooking a meal together. And going back to how we can make our culture more hospitable for the human body, it's about time we make our voices heard. If we, as the future of America, want to defend our lives and the future generations to come, we need to stand up for the implementation of change now. Boycott processed foods by opting in for whole foods. If we stop supporting the companies that sell us junk, or if we go the extra mile to find different suppliers for fresher fruits that won't spike our blood sugar, the same companies that are slowly killing us will eventually go extinct, just as our ancestors have.